Are we live?
All right, yeah, we live.
Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to this week. We're gonna be showing some cool stuff. Dang, Louis, you got a lot of background noise, man.
Good. I should mute my sound.
Yeah. I wonder what happens when you mute. Whoa. I feel like I just entered a cave and like there's absolutely silence. Um, but anyway, yeah, hey everyone. Um, we got some really cool stuff for you today, specifically like some breaking changes. So, it is what it is. Like, it's always sucks to have breaking changes, but sometimes you need to have the pain before you can get like the benefit. And this is one case. So if you're using some of these, like, yeah, I know it's gonna be a little bit tough to update. It's not too terrible. It's just some little name changes and stuff. So as long as you just follow like what we talked about here, you should be good to go. But in the long run, I think this is going to have really good impact to the framework and to the developer experience as a whole. So should be good. We're going to be talking about some exciting extension that we built for the 50 extensions by March 31st goal. And then finally, a big major release of the storage API. So with that, Lewis, let's get started. First of all, how you doing today?
You're doing very well, man. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Yeah, doing pretty good. I'm excited with all these features, man. Like, what's the deal with all these breaking changes? What do we have here?
All right. So the first one would be the background search worker. I noticed that we were using the export const handler, so that enforced the function name of the message handler to be called handler, which is not which is not very what is it, flexible for a lot of people. Yeah, and actually, for most other framework, for example, like Next.js, the API route would use export default instead of export const, because export default, you can export a thing that can be named anything, and then on the importer side, you import default, right? So that's the idea. So it's kind of convention, and so I just decided to use export default kind of syntax instead. So we switched to over to export default in the latest version. So that will allow this will actually allow two things. The first thing being that you can now name your handler function anything. The second thing is is now you can now actually chaining a middleware kind of architecture, because with default it's actually very easy to, well, you can do it with handler too, but with export default, the middleware architecture that people have been familiar with in Express and like Next.js can now be reused in here actually. Yeah.
That's like, yeah, that should be a good change. So if you're using background service worker, the messaging in the ports, like basically Plasma HQ slash messaging library, change your export const handlers to export default. That's like um, the action item that you need to take in order to use newer Plasma versions.
Yep.
Um, then we got another one here. Simple rename for the types, right?
Yep.
The type declaration. Um, yeah. Then we got automatic env typing. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I found that every time I add a new environment variable, I had to manually add it to the type, the declaration file, and that's kind of annoying. So in the new version of Plasma, we handle that. We just every time you add a new environment variable, we just parse that and we just add it into a hidden typing declaration file inside the Plasma directory, and that provide typing for your project out of the box. Yeah, and the cool thing is actually it will suggest only the environment variable that your dev server are seeing at the moment. Yeah. So basically, well, yeah, but the thing is, it's only for a dev server. So
No, but
I
that's
guess,
great, right? Because
yeah,
because then like if you add an env while your dev server is running, it won't register in your application, right? So this gives you like a sort of a way to see like, oh wait, why am I having type errors in VS Code for this env. Oh, I need to restart a dev server in order for this env to actually exist within my
So
application.
my actually it, so the dev server actually take on the change. My bad.
Okay. Can you explain more? What do you mean by that?
So it does take the change when you add some new variable. It does pick up the change and updating the declaration. So yeah, the problem is now people would get the type auto completion, but you will still it's an illusion, right? It's an illusion. Oh, okay, the typing looks good, but it's actually not appearing on the bundle side.
I see. Either way, like the that is exact same behavior as if you were adding types
That's
manually and
was
you forgot
previously
to get rid of the developer server and like start it up again, right?
precisely yes.
So I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah,
Cool. That's awesome. Um, make default version 0.0.1.
yeah.
So with this one, if you try to do pm create Plasmo and you have the hello world extension, maybe like you modify it a little bit, maybe you change the name, whatever. Now you're ready. You have this amazing extension. Now you're ready to publish it to the Chrome Web Store. It will complain. And there are a lot of reasons why Chrome Web Store will complain about uploads. Sometimes your icons are too small, sometimes they're too big, other times the dimensions of your like images and screenshots aren't right. There's all sorts of things. So a lot of those we can control, sometimes we can't. And one of them that it complains about, which we definitely can control, is this idea that Chrome Web Store does not consider version 0.0.0 valid to the Chrome Web Store. I'm not sure exactly what the minimum is, but we decided the minimum for Plasmo should be 0.0.1. So now when you do pm create Plasmo, instead of the default version that gets created as 0.0.0, now it's 0.0.1 in kind of relation to the Chrome Web Store. So when you go ahead and upload your zip and do all the fun stuff, the Chrome Web Store won't complain. Maybe it'll complain about all the other stuff that you need to fit into their bucket, but it won't complain about this thing. So we have that now, and also all the examples are updated as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool. Next, we have alias resolution prioritize.
Yeah, so that's a fix. So previously we we delegate the alias resolution to Parcel, but Parcel oftentimes deprioritize alias, and they would try to resolve like module uh, from npm registry first. They try to look up npm registry for a module to install instead of like looking up the alias, at least instead of prioritize alias first, which is somewhat weird to me that they would do that. So with this fix, it basically, so for example, when you in your package JSON, you have an alias specification saying, hey, buffer should point to my source slash buffer.ts file. This should do it for you. It will prioritize the alias that you have specified. And this so the reason why I actually added this change because I actually need it for the Firebase inspector that we're going to talk about soon. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that should be a good change and should help people that use aliases. Um, Awesome. So yeah, cool. So that's basically on the framework side. We have some breaking changes and also some features and fixes. Um, if you have any thoughts on like new stuff that you're really excited about adding to the framework, I know that there was an RFC that recently was created that I think we can also highlight here, which is being able to support registering content scripts into the main world. And it looks like Chrome version 11, like 111, is actually going to allow, which is amazing. I mean, this is something that I've been wanting for a long time. Chrome version 111 is actually going to make it so that you can specify declaratively main world content scripts. So you no longer have to use chrome.scripting.execute script and then specify world main, but rather you can add like world main into your manifest JSON. And the idea with this RFC is that we want Plasma to be able to support this kind of config. And if you're interested in this at all, give it a thumbs up. If you have some insights or some opinions or thoughts, comment on here. We have a great discussion about what's going on. Um, and if you're just curious and you want to see whether, because I know a lot of people have been talking to us about like, this main world thing is being really annoying and all that stuff. So if you want to watch this issue, what you can do is you can actually click here to watch, and then you can say like, you can specify like custom, and then you can put it there, or you can simply like just follow this and follow our Discord because we'll likely be talking about this. But if you're not on our Discord, most of the important discussion will probably be happening within this GitHub issue.
Yeah, so one way to watch specific the issue is in the notification section on the sidebar.
On the sidebar, yeah, or you're
Yeah, so
subscribed.
you already subscribe, so it say unsubscribe, but for people who have not subscribed, it will say subscribe to the issue. Yeah. So that's one way to
Yeah,
watch this specifically. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one.
So there's a bit more detail in this issue actually. So the
Yeah,
thing is that the issue actually is asking for Plasma to support this feature before ahead of time, about I would say 3 to 4 months before Chrome releasing the actual feature. That is actually the RFC here that's asking it. And yeah, so I would say that it might be interesting to implement it on our end, just so that we can catch up on the feature, right? So that people can actually enjoy the new feature of Chrome. And then, sure, when they actually release the config, then we can remove the code path, or when all the browsers align on that, right? Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think this kind of also aligns a little bit with what we were talking about before. Um, I believe that it is here. Um, there are a lot of issues with this API,
Mm-hmm.
um, just in terms of complexity.
Yep.
And I think this is something that if we can somehow tie in this RFC with this sort of example, but more specifically, like this sort of like, I don't know, way of thinking about stuff,
Mm-hmm.
um, it would be awesome because then people don't like the biggest issue that I think like the messaging stuff hasn't addressed yet um, is this idea of the life cycle. Um, like, where is this? Not RFC, RPC. You know why I'm not seeing it?
Um, I might have
I think
renamed it to messaging.
I think you renamed it.
To messaging, I think it might
Yeah,
be.
messaging.
Is the Plasma HQ messaging. Uh, issue 310.
Yeah, so like this whole thing is a huge mess. Developers have to think about a lot of this stuff, and I don't think it makes sense. Or it does make sense for them to have to think about this stuff because different extensions will want to do different things based on these sort of places where they can go. Um, but like making this kind of an explicit life cycle would be really valuable to developers, in my opinion. A lot of people are saying um, like this got like 7 likes because yeah, it's like super annoying. I know that firsthand. Like if you got kind of like get a update, um, then all of your content scripts you need to like unload them and stuff, and it's super annoying. Um, and I think this kind of fits into this idea of like how do we register. I think the bigger question here isn't like how do we register content scripts into the main world. It's more like how do we register content scripts, like what does that mean, and how can Plasmo using the ability for us to have a runtime actually make this really really powerful and a lot simpler for folks. So I'm really excited about this RFC specifically, even if we don't get into kind of fixing a lot of the issues here and stuff. I think at least we're taking a good chunk out of it by building something that can potentially support registering content scripts into the main world. And we can repurpose that code later for doing even more powerful stuff. That's why I'm really excited about this RFC.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's it on the framework stuff. We're going to be talking about storage a little bit later, but that's kind of framework related, but not so much. But let's talk about Firebase. So
Yeah.
Lewis, we have the Firebase inspector. It's online now. This GIF is not showing for me. Here it is.
Hmm.
So we're here on the Firebase. You click inspect, and then it'll open up this little pop-up, and that went by a little bit too quick. So inspect itero user, and then it tells you whether a claim and value. So can you walk through kind of like what this pop-up is showing here?
Yeah. So let's talk about authentication, right? So we're using auth2 for our authentication using Firebase authentication, right? And with that authentication mechanism, one way to embedding permission into each account is to use a custom claim. A custom claim is a way to assigning extra permission, extra metadata for each account that is embedded directly into the access token every time that they request, basically every time that the user trying to requesting an access token from Firebase, Firebase will return an access token with this custom claim that on our application we can use to check to make sure that they have those permission. And so, for example, in our application for Firebase application, one of the custom claim we have is called Itero enable, which we use to enabling access to Itero for our user, basically. Yeah. So this allows us to actually selectively enable certain user, even though they haven't, selectively enable some user to access the platform if we needed to. Or there are sometimes we want to debugging a user permission or access to application. We can actually use this. Now we have the extension to actually linking our email, the user email, to all of Itero kind of infrastructure data and triaging our issue. Yeah.
Got
Like
it.
right on the Firebase, and the cool thing is it's right on the Firebase dashboard, so it's less of a hassle, but it can be run anywhere, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. So what are kind of like the next steps for an extension like this? Like what do you envision like version 2.0 to have?
I would say version 2.0 would expanding on the idea of what else can we link the user account to, right? So the user account has all of this kind of so what a user account has a record, in all of our database. We have several database table, and each of them contain a piece of, you know related to this user, right? And so I think we're very powerful. We can inspecting or have a view of an overview of what this user has, and allowing us to have like control and so on. And imagine we can do this in other places where we actually tracking the user journey, like Datadog, right? Datadog or Sentry. Then we don't have to go back and forth between Sentry and Firebase. We can look at like, oh, here's Sentry. Let's take a look at what this user has and go directly. So we can cross link directly. We don't have to like manually look them up. So in a sense, it's a Firebase dashboard available everywhere for us.
Right. It's kind of related to like this idea of like how people have data warehouses, right?
Yeah.
And then you have your Firebase data, you have your um, other kind of data from other providers that's all about the same user, and then you can like join these tables and then have like a cohesive view of what the user is up to and doing and stuff like that. Um, so it's kind of like that, but rather than that existing in the back end, now it exists in the front end, like via a Chrome extension, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And I can imagine we can link this to many more places. And again, I would say as we build more tooling and we get familiar with the API that we are using, then we can have an extension that combine all of this together too.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. This is super cool. So just to show it again, now that we kind of have a view. So you highlight an email address, you click this button, and it will literally like connect to Firebase. And this doesn't have to be in the Firebase website, right? This can be anywhere, but
Precisely.
it will,
It can be
but the
anywhere.
extension will load this little pop-up. So let's just show it again. It will load this little pop-up. The pop-up will connect to Firebase, and then it will show you the claim and the value for Itero enabled. Now, and then later on we can have like more cool stuff. I mean, the other thing is like we can totally have things within the UI too. Like we can have like new buttons and stuff. Like really extend what it means for Firebase to like the Firebase UI. We can extend Sentry, but the thing that's really powerful about this approach, rather than having these buttons, is that this works anywhere, and you don't need to always think about, oh, what is the UI going to look like on the web page? How do I like inject into it and stuff like that? So that's super super cool. So that's the Firebase inspector.
Yeah.
We'll
One
have
cool.
more.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
so I just want to link this to the previous stuff that we're talking about the alias, right? So one of the reasons why I fixed the alias issue on Tasmo framework is because this extension actually uses Firebase admin API on in the background service worker, right? And we do encrypt or we securely store API to a private key and so on. And so with that API key, uh, we do an access token fetching with Firebase, and then we do like basically we do a bunch of REST call, a REST API call. And one problem that I found is that apparently the encoding that's being sent back by the Firebase server is say that the data is gzip. Is that how you pronounce it? Gzip or
gzip,
just
yep.
yeah?
Gzip.
So they declare that it's gzip encoded, right? But the payload is plain text. So there's a mismatching between the encoder and the payload. Oh, I mean the response. And the problem is that right now, every time that the API client trying to fetch the data, it will load the gzip encoding header, or yeah, the header, the content. Yeah, it's like content encoding, right? It will look at that header, and it will try to use the gzip polyfill to try to unzip the payload. But because the payload is not zip, it crashed. It just throw an error. So I had to basically use my polyfill to actually just polyfill the gzip module and just cross it out. And it worked. It worked on both post and get and get. So apparently everything is fine. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So and it worked for us. So I mean the thing is that this extension is totally for internal use. So I will say as long as it works for us, I wouldn't worry too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Super cool. All right, well, that's a Firebase inspector. Next up, and yeah, just to highlight, like if you want access to the development of these extensions, so what does that mean? That means that you're gonna get the source code. You're gonna see the live updates of all of these extensions. You're going to actually get like the ability to build these extensions and use them internally, and all this other stuff. You can sponsor us. So we take sponsorship on GitHub, and that would be the $25 a month tier. So when you subscribe to us with $25 a month, we'll add you to this private repo that we have. The private repo contains all of these extensions that we've been talking about for the last few weeks, and many more coming. So if you're curious or interested, um, check that out. All right, cool. So moving towards the big thing this week, we have um, the storage API major V1 release, um, that looks like a jar that you can store stuff in. It also looks like a salt shaker because there's a lot of stuff with salts in this release. Louis, you want to take it away?
That's good. By the way, I think we forgot to announce we're live on Discord channel.
Okay, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. Uh, all right. But in terms of the storage API, so this is a major release that we got I'll say that after the alpha version of the V0, right? The V0 has been around, being used by a bunch of people. We gather a lot of feedback, and we understand kind of the main use case, right? That's most people were using it for. And surprisingly, it wasn't what we intended it to be, right? Originally, the storage API was mainly made for iteration, right? So it would automatically synchronizing the web, the Chrome storage and the web local storage automatically, just so that you can just bypassing the key and so on, or sharing keys or sharing like session or sharing data between web pages. To be honest, in a very very like easy manner. But as we have getting more and more user and as more people tell us about their pain point, we realize that well, most people actually use the storage API to store and token to store access token actually, or encrypted token or data that they would like to secure. So a lot of user would not want to, but a lot of user who use storage API would prefer it to not synchronize by default. So that's the one thing that we took uh, for the major release. And the second thing is that well, we add a bunch of we add like some good to have feature. For example, the clear method is something that is is needed, right? Because each storage instance is linked to a certain area. So having the clear method would help with clearing up the data properly. Um, but yeah, anyway, so with that, we incorporate the feedback and releasing V1 of the storage API, which now deprecating the previous terminology, the terminology secret. Previously, we call any key, any value that's not being shared with the web page, with the web local storage to be secret. But now, the V1 in V1, all storage are secret by default, meaning they will not be shared with the local storage web API, and and we remove this terminology called secret, and we replace it with the term copy. So now, if you would like a value, a key value pair to be copied to local storage, you would specify that in the copy key list. Or you can also there's all copy uh, to just say everything should be copied over. So we reverse that that kind of share by default. It's now secret by default. And you have to copy them manually, or you have to specify them explicitly specify the key you want to copy over. Yeah, and and then secondly, there's the an extra feature is secure storage. So secure storage is a new storage API is implement the storage API with encryption and decryption built in with the web crypto API. And the key use case would be storing. You can use this to immediately storing private key. Yeah, you can use to store private key, secret key, and so on. As long as your user specify a password, right? So you have your end user. So the user of your extension would give you a password, and you can use a password to easily encrypting your data in this storage. Yeah,
Where do you store the password?
the password should be the user responsibility. They input
Uh,
the password.
Yeah, yeah. So like when I input a password, um, the developer needs to use that password and stuff, right? So
Exactly.
where do you keep that password?
So they pass the password right into the storage instance, to which it create a key. It create a crypto key. That is, you can tell it to extract it if you want to, but at the moment, this crypto key is non-extractable. And then the secure storage instances would use that crypto key together with like the storage engine to decrypt and encrypt data as you read it right. So the API to get and set data would be the same as your storage, the normal storage API, but you just have to add a set password call before all of that, and it will create a crypto key, and the crypto key is not extractable, meaning that even if it's in memory, the user will not be able to extract. Or like for example, if there's someone who might have access in the middle of the user trying to use this secure storage, right? They will still not be able to extract the raw password.
So what I'm asking more is like if I go into the pop-up and then the extension says like, "Hey, enter your password before you can start using this extension." I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so I enter my password. I close that pop-up. Um, like, how does the background service worker know what the password is?
No, it will not, because basically, yeah, the entire once so the whole data, the whole encrypted data is being stored in storage. So every time that the user would like to access these encrypted data, they have to specify their password again. And it's a very common mechanism for most crypto wallet and also password manager as well. Where, for example, I think in one password, or at least I don't use one password yet, but I've seen people talk about how you constantly have to repeat your password to unlock your vault. But that's the case for Bitwarden, where every time you open it up, uh, it stored the. So I think it take the password and it create a crypto key, and it maintained that crypto key for a while until some session happened. I think they have like some kind of cleanup after a while, and they clean up the key, and I have to re-specify the password again.
Got it.
Yeah, but basically with the crypto key, that crypto key is used to basically um, encrypt and decrypt the data coming straight from the from that's been stored inside storage. And the mechanism we store data inside storage is basically we make an IV and we make a salt at a certain size, and then we we make and then we encrypt the data, make turn them into buffer, and then we concat the IV, the salt, and the content encrypted into like the final kind of a box content, and then we turn it into base 64 and store that in the storage as plain text.
Nice.
And then so basically encryption and decryption all require the key, and if the key is wrong, they would not receive the right data. It will actually throw error because we're using PDK-F2 or whatever that is. I forgot the name, but basically the function to derive the key, uh, and this and the variant we're using, uh, AES GCM, that will throw an error if the password is wrong.
Nice. Yeah, there's I'm excited to see like kind of how this helps people. I think there are a ton of, as you said, crypto wallets. There's a ton of password managers. I mean, even something as simple as like storing a token, right? Those
Mhm.
things can definitely use something like this, especially if like your users. I mean, I can imagine you can have something in your extension that's like turn on paranoid mode, and then when they enable this, they have to enter their password every single time like they want to do stuff with your extension or like to load your extension and so on. um, and then that just kind of like helps make it so that if you have some sort of, I don't know, malware on your computer or something, that it's much harder for the malware to actually access your secrets because those are at the end of the day stored on your file system in a Chrome directory if you're using Chrome. Otherwise, other Chromium browsers do the same thing but just with their own directories. So that's all stored in plain text. Now with secure storage, those things are stored securely. Just the UX is a little bit wonky, so it really depends on your use case. Like if you want to trade off. It's a common trade off that, back when we were building that cybersecurity startup, we constantly talked about, Lewis and I, was like user experience, speed, iteration, versus security, right? It's a common trade off. The best security products have both, which is amazing, but it's like very difficult to do. In this case, because you're doing the secure storage stuff, you have to prompt your user for passwords all the time. So definitely only use this if you really need to. Otherwise, like, you can check out, um, just using the regular storage, and then figure out whether like that is an okay like level of risk for your extension, right? Like if you're an extension that shows like, I don't know, cat gifts or something, you don't need to use secure storage. But if you're a crypto wallet, yeah, probably a good idea to like have a little bit of secure storage in there, in certain areas, especially. But yeah, it's all up to you.
Yeah. So one thing to note is that there's no forgot your password kind of mechanism available here, by the way, because everything is client side. Yeah. So basically, the key that's derived from a password um, is is pretty much um, has to be remembered by your user. Yeah. If they
Yeah,
lose the password, the content is gone. Basically, that's either you can wipe it, you can wipe the data and allow them to like redo stuff. But if they yeah, but otherwise you can recover it.
yeah.
So that's something to think about.
The other thing you can do is like, you can treat this like this is your front end, and then when they enter a password, you like send it over to your like, to your database, right? um, and then encrypt it on your end. When they click forgot password, you can like basically recover their password that way.
Hmm. Yeah, perhaps. So the reason why hmm, I'm not sure if you can link the crypto key generated by secure storage with
It's a password, right? So when they enter the password, the key will be generated.
yeah, I guess basically on the server side they would you would generate the key for them, right? Or you would communicate the password for them.
Yeah,
But
I was
then
thinking like communicate the password.
yeah, like
You can store this like, in sort of like cold storage kind of thing, um, encrypted, like, what do they call on a Oh man, I'm too far out of the cybersecurity game. But basically, there are these like devices that you can use that are very much like very
yeah, like
secure, hard to
Fido
tamper.
two.
Um, kind of,
Nice.
but it's
No.
not exactly. Yeah, I'll remember it like 7 hours later. It's okay.
Okay.
But yeah, like, actually, an iPhone is a really good example of this. Like, if you store passwords in your iPhone, that's probably like the most secure place you can have it. As long as you just like turn it off and like have airplane mode on and just never touch it, except when you need your passwords, and put it like in a safe. That is the most secure like place you can have your passwords in the like in terms of a consumer product. There are
Hmm.
enterprise products, that also have what the iPhone has. I'm completely blanking on the name. Secure module something. I don't remember. Um, but yeah, so I guess I mean, if you want to be fancy and do like this forgot password stuff, like the issue is, do not put these passwords in a database, please. Like,
Yeah.
do not do that, because if your database gets hacked, which it probably will, now all these passwords are basically
Okay.
like up for people to take.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess if you store it, just I get the problem is right. So the case is that people store a hash of the password. So even then, if you store a hash of the password, you would not be able to. I guess they have to reset the hash, right? They can reset the hash.
They
That's how
can, yeah,
most
they can like reverse the hash.
yeah
Yeah.
reverse. No, like they reverse or they like reset, like remove the hash and allow them because most forgot password flow would let people just enter a new password, right? Don't they? Like
Yeah,
you,
but
they will
this
send.
So this would be like the issue is like with the forgot password flows, like you control both the password and the storage and like the
Precisely.
user or whatever. But in this case, like um, even if people have the passwords, let's say they do, they need to now get into your computer, right? Because your
Yep,
computer is the
precisely.
one that has the storage. So it's still possible, but yeah, it's pretty tough. Um, the one thing that we can add that might help here in terms of UX is when they enter the password for the first time, we use Chrome session storage to store the key that's generated. And then throughout the Chrome session, all the components of the Chrome extension can use the storage. And otherwise, like they won't be able to, and the user will have to ask for the password again.
Well, so one thing that because so the instances can survive, I think I would say the instances, the secure storage. So secure storage implement storage. So you can specify the area as well. You can specify session area if needed, but you can also just use sing or local area.
So I like the idea is like the reason why secure storage is awesome is because it allows us to store things long term in a secure manner, right? Before that, it was
Yep.
not possible.
Yep.
The thing about the session is more so to do with improving secure storage UX, where
Yeah, but is it
like
safe to
you,
store? Is it safe to store like a password inside session?
so that is basically what's happening by storing the password in a JavaScript variable.
Yeah,
There is no difference.
but if you, I guess if they input it, if the input into the input field is already there, right? It's in a memory in somewhere.
Yeah, if it's like the distinction I have is like in memory versus on disk. Um, on disk is easier to get to, unfortunately. So that's why we need something like secure storage. But if things are in memory, they're in memory. Chrome storage, session storage versus like I don't know, like in the JavaScript memory, it's all the same.
I wonder because so what happened is when we take the password, we immediately use it to create a crypto key. Does it make a difference at all or not?
Can you explain what you mean by make a difference?
Does storing the password as a crypto key make a difference comparing to storing it as a plain text in
Um,
memory? So
So
I,
we're,
I
we're
so
yeah,
I don't.
I know what you mean. We're getting into a little bit of a like paranoid state by this answer that I'm about to give. Um, like realistically, no. But if you want to be kind of like put the tinfoil hat on, yes. There are people that let's say I get the memory, I get like your RAM, right? Maybe like let's say it's 20 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes and plus 20 gigabytes for like other stuff. Um, I can run tools called carvers on that memory image that can pull stuff out of the memory. And one of the carvers I could potentially have, and just assume that it's like fancy regex. Just think of it like that. I can have a fancy regex that checks like the like signatures within the memory image to pull out certain things. So if the like key that you're talking about has a unique header, then that can be easily carved. But what I'm talking about here is like security through obscurity. So like at the end of the day, if someone actually really wants to get the password, they'll be able to get it. If someone really wants to get the key, they'll be able to get it if they can pull your memory. To pull the memory requires administrative privileges, and it's really hard to do. So that's another thing. Like normal malware doesn't do this.
Hmm. Yeah, because basically when I was implementing this feature, I watched a bunch of talk about security with web
Yeah.
security and web crypto in general. Yeah, and a lot of the practice would be to keep just keep the key as a crypto key. If you get the password, turn it into a crypto key, and because it's a buffer. So basically, because so I don't know much about the crypto key yet. I read briefly about it, but it seems like it's like a hashing of the key of the original password that it used to encrypt the data, and so it's slightly safer.
Why is this slightly safer?
I don't know. I mean, it's safe. I mean, I guess it's a recommended practice over just storing password in a variable.
Got it. Um, I guess the one like reason I could think of in top of my head is like people might reuse passwords, right?
So
So
here's the
if
thought,
someone
right? Is
takes a
that
key, then they don't get the
so
original password, and then they can't hack your other stuff too.
so for example, right, if they somehow if the user input the password, right, and the developer stored the password directly into a var something, right, some variable, and this variable expose to the website, and then there's other extension that can inspect that. Won't they be able to extract that memory block if those passwords stored in plain text
Um, so in
on the
this
website
case, like,
itself?
what's the difference between the buffer and the password?
I think the buffer is a different representation of the password.
Sure, but
So
can't the other website like extract the key and then perform
so the crypto
operations?
key. So that's the thing. The crypto key has two mode operation. There, so you can. So the third parameter would. So the third parameter allow you to either extracting it or no, not extracting. So there's an extractable crypto key, and there's non-extractable version of it.
Got it. So in the case of like Chrome session storage, like those things don't apply, right? That's like if you're talking in the JavaScript land, like crypto key has this property, right? It's an object, and then you it doesn't allow you to like extract the actual like representation of the object. But we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about um like session storage,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So I wonder if the user can basically, because the crypto key generally you can turn it into a buffer, right? And then basically forwards. So once you basically forward, you can put it in storage, in session storage. But is that too
R-
paranoia?
Yeah, yeah, we can take a look. But yeah, anyways, guys, let's let's call it a stream. Next week, hopefully, we'll have some more updates on the storage stuff after we discuss some stuff and whether stuff is paranoid or not. If you guys have any feedback on what we just talked about, if you have any feedback on the actual release, so over here, like the storage V1 release, um, let me put a little party thing on here. Um, Let us know on our Discord. We're really responsive on Discord. So any sort of like, I mean, just to talk about this stuff, right? A lot of this came from feedback that we received on Discord. So super appreciate everyone that gave us some good feedback. Um, and yeah, like if you have more feedback, please give it to us. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week for more Plasma fun stuff.
Awesome. See y'all.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Take care.